I had always had this space to myself, a place that felt like my own little universe, untouched by the chaos of the outside world. It was my safe haven, where my thoughts roamed freely like wild horses sprinting across an endless field. Here I was in control of my dreams, the commander of my imagination. Tucked away in the back of the house, far from the noisy street and the chatter of the living room, my room remained undisturbed. Sunlight barely reached this secluded spot, and I preferred it that way. On scorching afternoons, while the rest of the house sweltered under the unforgiving sun, my room remained cool, a welcome retreat from the heat. The walls were a deep shade of blue, reminiscent of the ocean at twilight, when the sky and water seemed to merge into one. That color had a soothing effect, like a lullaby for my restless thoughts. I had decorated the walls with care, covering them with posters of my favorite footballers frozen in mid-action, their intensity almost leaping off the paper. Beside them, images of musicians I admired filled the space, their faces alive with passion as they played or sang. Each picture told a story, a reflection of the aspirations I held close. But my room was more than just a sleeping space. It was a reflection of me, a symbol of the person I was and the one I hoped to become. The books scattered across my desk, the journal resting by my bedside, and the faint trace of lavender from an old air freshener made it feel warm, real, alive. This wasn't just a room, it was my escape, my stronghold, the one place where I could truly be myself. That night, however, felt different. I was stretched out on my bed, my favorite spot in the world, headphones snug over my ears, drowning out everything except the music. Every note pulsed through me, vibrating deep in my soul. The rhythm pulled me away, like a slow-moving river carrying me beyond reality into a vast sea of imagination. It wasn't just sound, it was a journey, each lyric shaping dreams I had never dared to say aloud. With my eyes closed, the world around me faded away. In my mind, I wasn't just a quiet dreamer lying in the back room of a house. I was someone fearless, someone bold, someone unchained by limits. I envisioned myself chasing after my biggest ambitions, running without hesitation, unburdened by doubt or fear. My heart felt open, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. For a brief moment, the only thing holding me back was the ceiling above my head. Then I heard it, a creak. Not the usual groan of the house settling into its old frame, nor the wind's playful murmur slipping through loose window panes. No, this was different. It was careful, intentional. The kind of noise someone makes when they're trying to stay silent but misstep. My heart jolted, skipping a beat, like it had been startled awake. I sat up quickly, pulling off my headphones. Silence pressed in around me, thick and heavy, amplifying every sound, making every shadow stretch deeper into the dark. My room was blanketed in gloom, the corners swallowed in shadow. The only light came from the thin sliver of moonlight filtering through the blinds, casting eerie patterns along the walls and floor. The way those shadows twisted and shifted only made the unease building in my chest worse. I knew I wasn't alone. A cold shiver ran down my spine, making every hair on my body stand on end. My instincts screamed for me to stay still, but my hand moved on its own, slipping beneath my pillow to grab the small flashlight I kept there. It was never meant for situations like this, just a backup for when the power went out or I needed to find something in the dark. But now it felt like my only defense against the unknown. With unsteady fingers, I flicked it on. The beam of light sliced through the darkness, carving away the shadows like a blade. Slowly, I swept it across the room, illuminating every inch. My bed, my desk, the posters on the walls, the books scattered on the floor. Everything was as it should be. Relief began to settle in until I saw it. A shadow shifted near the door. Not the kind that flickers when the wind nudges the curtains or when moonlight shifts across the room. No, this shadow moved with intent, slow, deliberate, as though aware that I was watching. My breath caught in my throat and my pulse thundered in my chest, each beat like a drum in the stillness. The flashlight quivered in my grip as fear slithered its way into my bones, wrapping around me like a heavy, suffocating weight. This wasn't just my imagination playing tricks on me. Something or someone was there, lingering, just out of sight. Slowly, I pushed myself to my feet, my heartbeat so loud it was all I could hear. "Who's there?" I called, my voice unsteady despite my attempt to sound strong. My words floated in the air, met with nothing but silence. Then, out of nowhere, a soft chuckle. The sound sent a fresh wave of chills down my spine. I whipped my flashlight toward the noise, expecting, no, dreading to see someone. But there was nothing, just empty space, and yet every nerve in my body screamed that I wasn't alone. I swallowed hard, trying to steady myself. I wasn't prepared for this. I wasn't ready for some kind of ghostly encounter or whatever was happening. But I wasn't entirely defenseless either. I had spent time reading about bravery, about facing fears head on. My room wasn't just where I dreamed, it was where I prepared for life's battles, big and small. Tightening my grip on the flashlight, I reached for the old baseball bat leaning against my desk, the one I kept just in case. Taking a slow, deliberate step toward the door, I forced my voice to stay steady as I whispered, "You can't scare me." The words were more for me than for whatever was lurking in the dark, but somehow, saying them out loud gave me a sliver of courage. Then the door creaked, loud, sharp, a sound that cut through the silence like a blade. I froze, my entire body tensed, and then a figure appeared in the doorway. The broad silhouette filled the frame, backlit by the dim hallway light, casting an imposing shadow across my floor. For a split second, fear surged in my chest, but just as quickly it faded. Because instead of terror, I felt something else, a strange sense of readiness. I had anticipated the unfamiliar, and now that it had taken shape, I felt composed, steady, and prepared. "I heard you," he said, his voice even but tinged with amusement, as if he were testing me. "You think you're ready for anything, don't you?" I tightened my grip on the flashlight and kept my stance firm, unwilling to let my guard down. "Not now." "I am prepared," I responded, striving to sound as resolute as I felt inside. "For whatever comes." He stepped forward into the dimly lit room, the faint glow casting shadows on his face. I could see the marks left by long hours and sleepless nights, a map of his dedication and burdens. But there was something else, a flicker of pride in his gaze, something I hadn't noticed before. "Good," he said with a slight nod, "because life isn't just about being prepared for the monsters or the fears that lurk in the dark. It's about confronting the unexpected, like this." His words lingered in the air, heavier than I had anticipated, as though he were imparting a lesson I hadn't realized I needed. He gently guided me to sit on the bed, his hands warm and firm as they enclosed mine. There was a softness to his touch, yet it carried enough weight to make me feel that this moment held meaning, something unspoken yet significant. I glanced up at him and, for the first time, recognized the intensity in his stare. This wasn't his usual casual glance. Today was different. It was as if he were studying me, waiting for something, though I couldn't determine what. It wasn't the first time he had displayed this level of interest. Over the past months, there had been subtle moments, small gestures, lingering gazes, words that felt too heavy to be just friendly conversation. But today was distinct. There was a shift in his demeanor, in the way he sat beside me, in how he held my hands a little longer than necessary, in the softened tone of his voice. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It felt as though he was trying to move beyond the surface, stepping into something deeper, something I wasn't sure I was ready for. The tension in the room was palpable, the silence thick with an unnamed emotion. Every small movement, every glance, hinted that he was on the brink of something, and I wasn't certain if I was ready to follow. The uncertainty made my heartbeat quicken, yet there was an odd sense of anticipation. He wasn't rushing. There was no pressure, only a steady, deliberate interest that left me wondering what was truly on his mind, what he expected from this moment. He looked at me with quiet expectation, his voice low but distinct as he asked if I was willing to share something with him tonight. The way he phrased it, it wasn't exactly a question, more of an invitation, gentle yet carrying a weight of meaning I couldn't dismiss. "You'll enjoy it," he added, his tone almost teasing, but something about his words made it clear that this wasn't just a casual remark. I knew what he was referring to. It wasn't the first time he had hinted at it, and I had spent enough time around him to understand where this was leading. The thought made my heart beat a little faster, my stomach fluttering with a mix of nerves and curiosity. There was no denying that part of me was intrigued, drawn to the idea of exploring this next step with him. Despite the nervousness creeping in, another part of me felt ready, even eager. I didn't want to retreat or pretend I didn't understand. I wanted to embrace the moment and see where it led. I looked at him, and without uttering a word, I nodded. The decision was made. I was willing to take this step with him tonight, to experience whatever was to come. The lingering uncertainty now felt almost reassuring, as though we were both standing at the threshold of something unknown, yet exhilarating. He smiled, warmth radiating from his expression, and I could tell he was pleased. His happiness was evident in the way his face softened, his joy unspoken yet clear. Without saying much, he lifted me gently, carrying me toward the center of the room, placing me down with care, as if I were something precious. His intent seemed to be ensuring that I felt secure and comfortable, and I appreciated the tenderness behind his actions. Stepping back slightly, he regarded me with a calm, steady gaze. "Make yourself comfortable," he said softly, his voice gentle, as though he wanted to put me at ease. Then, after a brief pause, he posed a question, his tone sincere and inquisitive. "Is this your first time?" For a moment, I froze, my heartbeat skipping as I considered my response. The tension in the air was unmistakable, and I hesitated, uncertain of how to answer. A part of me was tempted to lie, to claim this was my first time in order to keep things simple, to avoid revealing too much. But then I reminded myself, honesty was always better. And in this moment, I didn't want to conceal anything from him. Taking a deep breath, I steadied myself against the nerves stirring within me. "No," I admitted, my voice quiet at first, but growing firmer as I continued. "I've been with someone before, twice actually, my last boyfriend." The words felt unfamiliar as they left my lips, but I knew I had done the right thing by being truthful. Vulnerability crept in, but so did an unexpected sense of relief. There was no longer anything to hide, and somehow that made the air between us feel lighter. I watched him closely, waiting for his reaction, wondering what he would think of what I had shared. Would he be surprised? Would he still see me the same way? All I could do was wait, my pulse quickening as I met his gaze. He regarded me with a thoughtful expression, then his face softened as he spoke again. "That's okay," he said reassuringly, his voice carrying no trace of judgment, as if my admission changed nothing between us. But then, his tone took on a slightly more serious edge, and I noticed the concern in his eyes. "But you are safe, right?" he asked, his question gentle yet direct. A small knot of anxiety tightened in my chest for a brief moment. I understood the importance of protection, and his inquiry made me feel both slightly nervous and reassured, because it meant he cared enough to ask. I didn't want him to have any doubts, so I quickly nodded, hoping to put his worries at ease. "Yes," I affirmed, my voice steady despite the slight tremor in my hands. His expression softened once more, and I could tell he appreciated my honesty. The concern in his gaze faded, and the atmosphere between us settled into something more comfortable again. I was grateful he had asked, even though it had made me feel vulnerable for a moment. It was crucial to me that we shared the same understanding, and I felt relieved that we could speak openly about it. It seemed as if time had slowed when he gazed at me, his eyes both intense and gentle, as though he was searching for something within mine. My heart pounded, uncertain of how to react. A hushed silence settled between us, interrupted only by the rhythmic sound of our breathing. Gradually, with an unspoken understanding, he leaned in closer, his fingers reaching for the buttons of his shirt. Each movement was intentional, as if this moment carried a deep significance. I remained motionless, observing, feeling the magnitude of what was unfolding. The room felt smaller, the world outside fading into the distance. His motions were measured and calm, as though he was ensuring that every action, every second, unfolded exactly as it should. He removed his clothing with unhurried precision, letting the tension between us rise. I couldn't look away. Caught in an odd blend of anticipation and curiosity, my heart hammered in my chest, each beat echoing louder than the last. There was something unspoken between us, a connection I could feel but not quite define. In that instant, everything else ceased to exist, leaving only the two of us in a shared space of silent understanding. With unsteady fingers, I began undoing the buttons of my blouse, each movement slow and purposeful. The atmosphere in the room was charged with an unspoken energy, thick with expectation. At first, I avoided his gaze, my heart racing as though it might burst free from my chest. But when I finally lifted my eyes, I saw his face brighten with a smile, one so warm and genuine that it dissolved all my anxieties. His happiness was unmistakable, his eyes alight with a mixture of admiration and joy. It wasn't just any smile, it was a silent reassurance, a message telling me I had nothing to fear. As each layer of clothing fell away, his grin grew wider, his excitement almost infectious. For a brief moment, I hesitated, my hands trembling as a wave of doubt swept over me. A flood of thoughts clouded my mind, each one threatening to hold me back. What if I wasn't enough? What if I didn't meet his expectations? The silence felt heavy, pressing down on me like an invisible weight. But then, his gentle laughter broke through the tension, soft and warm, like sunlight piercing through stormy clouds. It wasn't the kind of laughter that ridiculed. It comforted and reassured. I lifted my eyes again, and there he was, his expression filled with kindness, his smile disarming every lingering fear. "You're perfect," he murmured, his voice carrying a sincerity that left no room for doubt. Those two simple words wrapped around me like a warm embrace, dissolving my hesitation. It wasn't just what he said, but how he said it, as if he truly saw me, imperfections and all, and still believed I was enough. In that moment, something shifted. His happiness radiated, and it became contagious, filling the space around us with an energy I couldn't resist. It gave me a confidence I hadn't known I possessed, the strength to let go of my insecurities and simply exist in the present. Each second that passed with his unwavering gaze reminded me that I didn't need to be anyone but myself. And for the first time, I felt free. Our eyes met, locking in a gaze that sent an electric current through me, as though some invisible force connected us. The world around us seemed to dissolve into nothingness, leaving only the two of us standing in the charged silence of the moment. Time felt suspended, trapping us in a space where no words were necessary. Our eyes conveyed everything we didn't need to say. Then, as if drawn together by an unseen magnet, we found ourselves moving closer. It was effortless, as though our bodies acted of their own accord. The space between us diminished with each hesitant step, yet neither of us spoke. It wasn't planned or deliberate, just something inevitable, as natural as the waves meeting the shore. Our breaths mingled, shallow and uneven, mirroring the growing intensity between us. The air was thick with an energy that couldn't be ignored. My pulse quickened, yet an odd tranquility settled over us, as though we moved in complete harmony, guided by something beyond our control. Each step dissolved the distance that once separated us, as if the universe itself had conspired to bring this moment into existence, aligning every detail perfectly. The warmth of his presence was irresistible, drawing me in, and I could sense the same pull in him. His eyes never wavered from mine. There was no doubt, no hesitation, only an unshakable certainty that this was exactly where we were meant to be. The rhythm between us was unspoken yet undeniable, as if two souls, long apart, had finally found their way back to one another. It was a connection that defied explanation, a feeling beyond words, requiring only surrender. When our lips finally met, the world around us shattered into countless fragments, leaving only the two of us caught in time. It felt as though a dam had broken, releasing a flood of emotions that had been silently simmering, waiting for this moment. The warmth of his touch sent a shiver down my spine, and every brush of his skin against mine was electric, awakening something deep within me that I couldn't name. Each touch held meaning, a silent message in every movement. His hands found mine, their warmth grounding me, reminding me that this was real. There was no hesitation, no restraint, only an unbroken energy flowing between us, unstoppable and undeniable. It wasn't rushed or frantic, but rather deliberate and full of meaning, as if every second was meant to be treasured. We lost ourselves in the moment, the outside world fading into insignificance. Nothing else mattered but the connection we shared, an invisible bond strengthening with every beat of our hearts. Time felt altered, each second stretching into infinity, every sensation heightened, as if the universe itself amplified the beauty of this experience. It was more than just a kiss. It was a silent vow, a surrender to something greater than ourselves. We gave ourselves fully to the moment, letting go of everything else, the worries, the doubts, the uncertainties. Nothing else existed beyond the joy of being together, of finally embracing the depth of what had been quietly simmering between us. It wasn't solely about the physical intimacy. It was the intertwining of two souls, each discovering in the other something they hadn't realized they were seeking. When it ended, a whirlwind of emotions surged through me: relief, happiness, and an unexpected sense of fulfillment. A smile found its way onto my face, the lingering warmth in the room impossible to ignore. I turned to look at him, only to find his gaze already on me, his expression illuminated by a satisfied grin. It wasn't just any grin. It carried a blend of joy and mutual understanding, as if he too was soaking in the significance of what we had just shared. For a brief moment, we sat in easy silence, allowing the weight of the experience to settle between us. Then he turned to me, his expression gentle yet serious, his voice calm but intentional. "You have to keep this a secret," he said, his words both an appeal and a command. His eyes locked onto mine, searching for reassurance, as though our shared trust teetered on the edge. I slowly nodded, the depth of his words sinking in. There was something about the way he spoke, earnest and heartfelt, that made it clear just how important this was to him. His smile reappeared, this time softer, almost as if he felt reassured, and an undeniable closeness settled between us. A bond had formed, strengthened by our mutual understanding. Though the moment had passed, its presence lingered in the air, leaving us both with an unspoken connection neither of us could ignore.